No rubric that any of us is going to create is going to be perfect, especially over a long period of time. There's just too many other factors and variables that come into play within the assignments and so on that rubric may be attached to. And so we again want to continue this conversation about how we review our rubrics. And so as we look at our rubrics and go to reassess them, we want to understand that no rubric is perfect, that there are things that can happen, and maybe it wasn't written perfect in the first place, or great in the first place and needed some changes, but certainly we need to be able to adjust for changes that take place. Could be changes to the assignment instructions, changes to just things that we've discovered about details in the assignment that maybe we weren't completely focused on, potentially missing items from your rubric that you thought you had thought through everything, every detail within the assignment, but you missed something. Maybe new information comes into the picture about what your rubric should be measuring. You did some research, or a colleague pointed out something to you that creates a scenario where you change the needs of what your assignment and rubric are measuring for your students' performance toward their SLOs and objectives for the class. Adjusting over time, certainly. That's mainly what we're going to focus on here. But adjusting over time, that, again, some of those changes can take place over time and so on. But there could be other things, circumstances that come into play over time. Maybe you're reevaluating the assignment itself. Maybe you are updating the assignment. Let's be honest, maybe it's an assignment that you've used for years, and you just need to update it based on maybe updates in technology or just updates in the pedagogy that you're using within your classroom. You're reevaluating that assignment and determining whether there is another way for students to be able to demonstrate their learning to you. And so you need to update the rubric based on that. When do we need to reassess our rubrics? Well, in a perfect world, each time you assign the particular assignment that uses that rubric. It could be each semester, each year, but it could be more often than that. Maybe even, hopefully you don't have to reassess your rubric if it's a weekly assignment. But potentially, maybe there's something that happened that you saw that kind of opened your eyes from a student's submission last week that you just didn't think about within your rubric. And again, part of this is just having a mindset that it's okay to change your rubric, and it's okay for you to learn things about the particular assignment, even though you felt like you, again, were intimately knowledgeable of the assignment and just knew the assignment really, really well. There could potentially still be changes that need to take place. If not, then certainly at some point in time, again, as we talked about, that maybe you need to change the assignment, something has happened over time, you at least need to look at your rubrics and determine if they need to be reassessed or not. Certainly any time that you make significant changes to the assignment instructions, you just need to review the rubric and make sure that the comments and performance levels and criterion and so on within the rubric still match the assignment instructions so that your students don't get confused between the instructions and what your rubric says. And again, this is a big one when a student submission makes you realize that the rubric is missing something. I've had that happen multiple times. And so you read, and yes, well, no, it could go either way, I guess. I was thinking that it needs to be, or it tends to be when just an excellent student tends to turn in a submission that is just kind of off the charts. And but it makes you think of some of the basic things that you would like every student to be able to be sure to include in their submission. But it could be the other way around. It could be on the maybe lower end of your rubric where a student submits something that really does not meet your expectations whatsoever. and you had not thought about a student turning in something of that nature. And so that would be good to include within the examples, possibly in your performance levels within your rubric, to make it more clear to your students when to implement this new rubric that you have adjusted and made changes to. Not in between grading students for the same assignment. Remember, one of the main concepts of using rubrics is that consistency in grading. And so you certainly, maybe this doesn't need to be said, but I just want to clarify, you certainly don't want to make a change. You've been grading some students and why are they doing this, or whatever, and you make that change to the rubric and now you start grading the rest of the students. You don't want to do that. You need to go ahead and finish grading based on the same rubric for all students for that particular assignment, or at least assignment round, and then make your changes to it. So once there is no way that a student from the same group, everybody has turned in this assignment, there's not somebody that could potentially turn it in late or whatever. So once there's no way a student from that group cannot be graded for that same assignment using the updated rubric, then you can make changes, implement the changes to that rubric. If the rubric applies to multiple assignments for the same type with the same group of students, so again, maybe it's a weekly essay or something similar. If you do make a change right in the middle of the class or in the middle of the succession of these assignments for this using this rubric, then you need to be absolutely sure to point out that change in the rubric to your students. Don't make it a surprise afterwards. That goes against the whole point of using rubrics, to make very clear to your students what your expectations are for their submissions. And so don't let this be a gotcha moment where somehow they were mystically supposed to know that you made that change in the rubric. You need to make it very clear to them that change happened in terms of what you expect them to do for their submissions for this assignment. However, you definitely want to make the change to the rubric, or at least in your notes, while that needed change is still fresh in your mind. And so again, I'm thinking here of, you're going along grading a particular submission from a student, and one way or the other, whether it's something excellent that you see in there that you would like to implement somehow within your rubric, or a student turns in something that you really didn't even think of, that area being honestly that low or whatever. You need to make that change, at least in your notes or something somewhere, to be sure and add that change to your rubric so that you don't forget about it, so it doesn't slip your mind. If you think it's important right at the time that you're making that grading or think of that change, then you need to write that down somewhere. You can do a new draft of the rubric and make the change in it and save that on your computer or wherever you're doing it, and be sure to make notes that that's the new rubric next time around. Potentially add these rubric reviews to your calendar. So again, as you create assignments, maybe year after year, that use the same rubrics, we just want to make sure that your rubrics don't get stale. We want to make sure that even if you've refined it, that you don't go 5 years or whatever without reviewing your rubrics and just making sure that they're staying up to date with what you're expecting from your students. Maybe schedule your differing rubrics. Maybe you have 10 or 12 or whatever number of rubrics that you use for the different kinds of assignments that you create throughout the year or the semester. Maybe you just want to create a schedule of just reviewing those reviewing 2 or 3 of those every year, and then the next year you review another 2 or 3 or whatever. Just an idea to calendar that and to schedule those reviews. So we just want to have this mindset where, again, we just need to make sure that we're reviewing our rubrics, that we can't think of them as being perfect, that we just want to go back through and evaluate those either on a schedule or when things come up with changes. We just need to kind of have an open mind about that, to where we keep that in check and make sure that our rubrics are still good measuring devices.